All right, I will begin. So before I start, for everyone who's joined us, you will see a Q&A question answer button with like two message boxes. That's where you can ask your questions and the speakers will answer them. And if you have comments or want to share what you're thinking, then feel free to use the chat box. And okay, thank you all so much for joining us today. And this webinar is organized by Chintan and FES, and today we will be discussing sharing economy and how to recover the lost Indian tradition of fighting poverty. Chintan Environmental Research Action Group is a not-for-profit that works on sustainability through the lens of solid and hazardous waste and air pollution. Chintan reduces waste and consumption, manages solid and electronic waste, and advocates around materials, waste, and consumption. It uses waste as a tool to fight poverty, child labor, gender-based violence, and exclusion and climate change while creating green livelihoods. Chintan pushes back and combats unsustainable consumption. Thank you for coming to our third webinar. The first webinar was on fashion and the circular economy in India, and the second one discussed technology's role in making the fashion industry circular in India. And today, in the third webinar, we will discuss sharing economy and how to recover the lost Indian tradition of sharing to fight poverty. This webinar series is made possible by FES. FES is a non-for-profit German foundation committed to the values of democracy and social justice. With this webinar series, FES would like to create a nuanced and progressive discourse for social, economic, and ecological transformation with gender justice and climate justice at its core. In the post-pandemic world, societies and economies need to rethink and innovate more sustainable ways of doing business that is less extractive. The world has seen the interference with biodiversity has a significant impact on human health. Sharing economy combining the principles of circular economy offers an exciting possible avenue for increased sustainability and equity to build back green post-COVID-19. Sharing economies can create deep, lasting social transformation, have the power to lift people out of poverty through job creation, and create more sustainable, impactful modes of exchange. Thank you all for joining us. I now invite Tamanna, a researcher who will give us a quick introduction to what are sharing economies, and then Shruti will moderate the Q&A session. After that, we will have a discussion with our brilliant panelists here, and then we open it up to the audience for Q&A. Tamanna, you can go ahead now.
Thanks, Sriranjani. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for having me as well. I will take you very briefly through our research paper by Chintan and FES Foundation. We explored how the sharing economy can be used as a tool to fight poverty and uplift communities in India. Starting off, the linear economy is the dominant form of economy. It has been for a few years now. The basic idea is that the goods are produced, sent to the end user, and they eventually become waste. But a key element of the linear economy is that every individual is encouraged to go and buy their own good. In a sharing economy, the difference is it is encouraged that one individual goes and purchases an asset and then shares it with other individuals in the community. It not only prolongs the life of that particular asset or good, but it also reduces the ultimate waste. As a result of this, what we've seen is a transition from an asset heavy generation, which places more value on permanent ownership of a number of assets, to an asset light generation, which focuses more on temporary access or temporary ownership to goods that only they need for that particular time period. Apart from this, the sharing economy also allows you to harness the complete value of an idle asset. For example, if there's a family who is not using their car for a couple of months, they can put it on rent for a family that needs it. This prevents family in need to go through the extra transaction process of buying a new car, and it also allows a family to harness the value of an asset that would otherwise not give them any value for a couple of months. Apart from this, an interesting aspect of the sharing economy for us was that it also places value on your knowledge or intellect as an individual. So you are also allowed to put a value on any knowledge, any skill, or any other trade skill that you might have. In India, right now, you can see the sharing economy in the form of transport aggregators like Uber or Ola, accommodation aggregators like Airbnb, or in the past year, we've had a lot of co-working spaces come up, which are handled by organizations like WeWork. Even so, it's evident that right now, in its current form, the sharing economy is largely restricted to urban India. And to make it a tool to fight poverty, we need to get it to the masses, which is what we've explored on how to do. Historically, the virtue of sharing has been deep rooted in our culture. That's not something we don't know. But despite all of the other examples, very specifically, in tourism, we've seen the age of tour operators. They have these packages where they encourage the tourists to take part in local traditions, local festivals, purchase from local artisans. We've also seen, though it's more of a political governance strategy, transboundary water sharing is a topic of great conflict nationally and internationally. Despite that, the fact that there are so many of these sharing agreements prevalent across India has somewhat of a remnant of the sharing virtue that we have in our conscience. We also have, though I've not written it here, it was interesting that we Indians have historically placed a lot of importance in making knowledge accessible. This has been in the form of libraries or even these residential schools. So there's been a huge uh, progress on that as well historically. Over the past few years, however, materialism increased, which meant that the people who had things and the people who did not, there was a huge gap between them. There was a vicious cycle where if you earned more, you had more, and vice versa, resulting in a large socioeconomic divide along with increased poverty. Now, however, in the recent years, the younger generation is moving more towards minimalism. There's also a larger focus on sustainability or acting for climate change, which means that there is less pressure on having assets and more on actually changing the consumer behavior that we have in the market. This actually presents us with an opportunity to change how the market currently behaves, make it more accessible to every community, and put a pressure on sharing more, buying less, and also placing value on intellect and culture, which runs deep in our Indian history. There have actually been case studies done on this in the Indian context. The first one was done by Terry in Delhi. What they saw was comparing traditional farmers markets, stores, and online stores which sell organic food. It was the traditional farmer markets that, one, upheld the principles of a sharing economy. Two, they made the potential to earn through food markets more for the smaller farmers who cannot compete with the corporate giants. They also increased customer service experience. They built more trust with their customers. And lastly, in the long run, it showed that the farmers' markets, the traditional ones, actually have more market resiliency, especially in the faces of any disasters. The second one is slightly different. So we had an incident in the 1980s where there was a knowledge sharing agreement between Kani tribals and the TPGRI Institute in Kerala. So the event was that the Kani tribals shared information of a fruit that had anti-stress and anti-fatigue properties with the TBGRI scientists, who then created a mainstream drug out of it. It was then decided that a part of the royalties that they earned through the sale of that drug would be shared with the Kani tribals. However, a lot of groups objected to that, saying that the value that was being given to the Kani tribals was not enough for the knowledge that they were sharing with the scientists. Um, the process after that is not something I'll go into right now, but the point for this presentation is that one, knowledge sharing agreements are possible. So there is a chance to place immense value on the knowledge harbored by marginalized communities in our country. The second thing is we have to be very careful when we do that we're acting fairly and justly and placing the right value for their knowledge. The next thing we saw is what possible tools can we use to make the sharing economy more viable in India. The first is networking. This is important. Building trust is a key element for a sharing economy to function. So, one, teaching people how to network successfully, two, making networking possible between individuals and communities is important. The second is mutualization of production methods, which basically means you place the equal value on every stakeholder present in a supply chain and give them autonomy over the service or asset that they are offering. In urban planning, nowadays it's more apparent that the younger workforce wants to stay mobile. So there is less of a focus on buying cars or buying houses and more on temporary ownership. So adapting to that, what municipal governments can do. One, they can provide municipal goods and assets on rent or temporary ownership to people in their municipality and with other municipalities as well. Second, ideal municipal places like schools, gardens, parks, etc., can be handed to the community to host events, pop up shops, farming, anything else. Third is the municipal government can host workshops to impart skills and knowledge that can help individuals in their municipality go out and trade said skills and knowledge. The second thing we can have in urban planning is localized tourism. The first example of that would be immersive stays, where tourists are encouraged to go and live like that particular community's culture, tradition, be a part of their routine, have their food, basically be immersed in their culture. This allows a community to monetize their daily routine. It also places importance on their knowledge of their own history and their own culture and traditions. Economically, we all know that there are a lot of crowdfunding platforms available now, but changing that to be a direct person to person, not only financial but also goods sharing platform can help in furthering a sharing economy, making goods and services more accessible, more affordable. The second is knowledge sharing agreements, which I already spoke about with the Kani tribe. However, when we do this, we need to make sure that all stakeholders are made a part of the decision process, and also that the stakeholder group that is actually sharing the core knowledge has to be given most importance. The third is individuals can be taught how they can capitalize on their idle assets. So if someone has a piece of land or property that is not being used at the moment, how can they convert that to get the most economic benefit out of it is something that they can be taught. Technically, in the recent year, especially after the pandemic, the digital divide in our country became significantly evident. So the first hurdle is obviously trying to bridge that. But then, even in the current scenario, if we want the sharing economy to work, we need to make sure that the 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 platforms are available in services that is currently available to everyone. So that would mean mobile only or non-internet platforms. The second is provision of technology for everyone. So we also have a Digital India initiative by the government that aims to make digital media accessible. But even then, placing an importance of providing smartphones, laptops, tablets, anything that would help an individual enter the market is essential. The third is providing digital literacy and financial literacy. This is more for individuals that do not have access to gain these sort of skills to prevent fraud or prevent undervaluing the skill or asset that they are providing. Uh, this is what we saw. In India, it's pretty clear that we have a lot of supply of assets, knowledge, skills. We have a demand of it as well, increasingly so. Our population, not only is it dense, it's rapidly moving towards urbanization. As it moves towards that, it is evident that the urge to own permanently is going to reduce. So with our diverse cultures, our knowledge, the different kinds of services that we have to offer, the sharing economy in India has a huge scope. However, number one, as I mentioned, the digital divide is going to be essential to bridge. The second is prevalent discrimination and prejudice. As I mentioned a couple of slides before, trust building is a key element in the sharing economy. So if there is a preconceived discrimination against an individual, it might act against them and not let them have a fair chance at getting the most out of the sharing economy. That is a hurdle that needs to be tackled. As it is with everything, the sharing economy also comes with a set of risks. The first is a lack of robust regulation. This is seen in transport aggregators Uber and Ola. They usually charge very high surge prices, and they are not currently under the law to cap their prices set by the government. So this is one thing we need to tackle. Along with this is self-regulation. So the individuals that enter the sharing economy must themselves take care that they're not partaking in any adverse activities. The second is a threat to workers' rights and socio-economic divide. This was actually mentioned by economist Edgar Sock. So what he said was a sharing economy might increase the divide between people who can offer things and people who cannot. It can also lead to individuals not paying taxes, which might have an economic effect for the entire country. The third risk is a lack of tangible data. So at the moment, we do not have enough research, enough data to tell us the actual benefits of a sharing economy, especially in India. So the data that is also available is from aggregators like Uber and Ola, and publicly available data about that is very less. So having more data, more background studies would help us assess the viability of this economy to erase poverty much better. I think I'm almost out of time, so I'll just conclude it. The overall idea is that a sharing economy places value on the assets and services that someone has to offer. It also gives equal importance to someone who is in need of said assets and services. As a result, they are made more accessible, more affordable. And in a country like India, community knowledge, community culture is so diverse and so important. It places a value on that as well. If harnessed correctly, it definitely has the potential to uplift communities and fight poverty in the country. But how to do that has to be a topic of discussion, for which I think today's talk is going to be very insightful. With that, I'll hand it over to Sri Ranjani to introduce our speakers.
Thank you so much, Tamanna, for that great explanation and fascinating examples and case studies to explain what the basics. I will now introduce our incredible panelists. Dr. Rajnikant Singh is the Dean of Business Administration at JSPM Pune, who has over a decade of teaching and research experience with specializations in marketing management, digital marketing, and distribution channels. Dr. Singh is the author of research paper Sharing Economy, a New Way of Consumption in General and in India, with the sub-theme Sustainable Marketing and Strategies. Bhaskar Pant is the co-founder of Policy Monks, a Delhi-based research and advocacy organization working on areas such as platform economy and digital ecosystems, ICTs for sustainable development, artificial intelligence, and the future of work. He has advised and worked with policymakers, multilateral institutions, and MNCs on a range of policy and regulatory issues with a strong focus on technology. He recently co-authored a report on the impact of COVID-19 on the sharing economy in India. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so honored to have you both. We will first have a presentation by Dr. Rajnikant Singh, and then we will proceed to
Thank you. First of all, good evening to all the attendees and a warm welcome to all the panelists over here. And thank you to the panelists again and to Chintan India for having invited me and my co-colleague Bhaskar for joining this presentation and to give insights on the sharing economy. In fact, Tamanna has covered a lot of things that I was going to talk on. So that is really wonderful, which shows the insightfulness that you people have put in to understand the sharing economy. So that's really wonderful. So which means that the future of India is in very safe hands, if I'm talking on the sharing economy front. So with this, I'll start my presentation. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So, as the topic suggests, sharing economy, how to recover the lost Indian tradition of sharing to fight poverty. Now, this is from the Indian context. Okay. So, I have just given a brief uh, collage of the types of sharing economy that is there across the world and in India, with a special focus on the right hand side, if you can see, on the rural sector, because that is one area which has to come up, which is going to actually help in reducing the poverty level. Okay, so the learning objectives in my presentation would be an overview on the sharing economy, landscape of the economy, what are the economics involved, the various characteristics of sharing economy, the benefits, the Indian perspective of the sharing economy, impact and benefits of that in India, challenges that are there, the sharing economic contribution to sustainable development in India, and the way ahead for sharing economy in India. Okay. So as rightly covered by Tamanna, sharing economy is basically an economic system in which assets or services are shared between private individuals. Either you can share it free or for a fee. So you can actually call it a hybrid market model. Why? Because it is a combination of traditional and the new present model, that is of sharing. So this sharing can happen either business to business, or it can happen between business to consumer. Okay. Three major drivers for this. First of all, customer behavior, from ownership to sharing. Then, of course, the online social networks and electronic markets, which easily link consumers. Then, of course, the mobile devices and electronic services, which has come up and are booming right now, which help in use of shared goods and services more convenient. As said, sharing economy, socio-economic ecosystem. Why socio-economic? Because it is sharing, and economic because it is involved with money. So ecosystem constructed around sharing of human and physical resources. Okay. Areas included are creation, shared production, shared distribution, trade and consumption of goods and services by different types of people across the globe and organizations as well. Of course, the communities. Sharing economy activities, you can broadly put it into four categories, that is productive assets sharing, services exchange, durable assets ka usage increase, and those assets which are already there, recirculating it again and again so that people can reuse it. Okay. If I talk about the landscape, then sectors like healthcare, groceries, hospitality services, commercial services have members joining the sharing economy day on and day out. Highest joining rates seen majorly in three industries, that is transportation, as rightly put by Tamanna, that is Ola, Uber, rideshare services, hospitality, food and beverages, as you can see from Zomato, from Swiggy, and various other food bearing services. Then, if I come on the economics front, then the on-demand technologies, which is pretty innovative these days, have reduced considerably the transaction costs of exchange of goods and services. That coming down, so the cost factor for each and every shared service is coming down day every day. Plus, knowledge sharing has become very, very cheap these days because of easy accessibility of internet. Therefore, knowledge has become cheap and accessible. Okay. The characteristics of sharing economy broadly classified into largely market based. Why market based? Because it is related to the market and it is providing us a source of income and employment. Plus high impact capital. Why? Because a lot of capital in intensive work and time is involved in achieving sharing economy. Then crowd-based networks rather than centralized institutions or hierarchies which had already been there earlier. So now it is more of people coming together into communities and sharing. The fourth one is blurring lines between personal and the professional. What I'm trying to tell you over here is right now we are having a Zoom session wherein some people are professional over here, some people are personal over here, and we are being able to access and reach out to each and every person wherever we are. And that is cutting down on the distances of the professional front of meeting up into office and coming to the personal front of doing things from wherever we want to. Then, blurring lines between fully employed and casual labor, between independent and dependent employment, and between work and leisure. Right now, you can be enjoying a music also, plus you can be working as well because of the facility of technology which is there at your disposal. Okay. So if I'm going to talk on the benefits of the sharing economy, there is a term called as collaborative consumption or sharing economy, first actually coined in 1978, however came into being very strongly post 1995 after eBay was launched. So eBay actually provided a strong foundation for sharing economy that would eventually shape global markets, which is the scenario today. And from inception, sharing economy has penetrated various sectors, that is, as we had said earlier, transportation, property, real estate, fashion, education, healthcare, and now consumer goods. So, though we can say that sharing economy is still in its infancy, journey has been very promising so far. So, as I was telling you about the opportunities, so increasing accessibility to self-employment is one of the major benefits of sharing economy. Why? Because people owning a car can easily get tied up with Ola or Rapido, the ride-hailing providers, and they can work from the comfort of their home and use their own vehicle to generate extra source of income. Similarly, people can also sell unwanted pre-owned items on portals such as OLX and eBay, which enables anybody to earn an extra income out of products which were normally useless for them. Just a sec. Yeah. So it embeds a sense of trust in the community, as rightly said by Tamanna earlier also, that it's a very important aspect because community members have to trust each other. Then earlier apprehensions of having unfamiliar faces as guests, the Airbnb concept, wherein now homes can be shared for people from anywhere. So earlier this was not a concept, but now the concept has gone up drastically and people prefer staying at home because it is much, much cheaper rather than renting out into a hotel. Similarly, there are built-in ratings and reviews on ride-sharing apps and Airbnb, which keep providers and consumers honest. Similarly, trust-building efforts help sharing economy participants see one another as equals, building constructive relationships which was not there earlier. Okay, it has also resulted in higher savings with same lifestyle. What I mean to say over here is, if you want to decorate your homes, startups like GrabOrent can provide you with home furnishings and appliances on rent. If you want to wear designer clothing, Flyrope can provide you that. If you want to cruise on a Ducati around the city, if I'm talking about Bangalore or Pune, then you can go to rideshare. You don't have to own a Ducati. Similarly, beauty services are available on rent today by Urban Clap. Washing linen, there are lots of laundry services which are available on rent today, right? And this helps you maintain the lifestyle and results in much lesser spending on these items. Then more business opportunities. As you can see from the first statement over there, when BNB Airbnb was launched, the statements were, are you serious? It would never work. An idea, ridiculous, superfluous, destined to crash and burn. Today, years later, it's dominating the travel industry with more and more people choosing homestay over luxuries of a hotel. Okay. Then another startup. I mean, this is something very uh, novel and unique. It allows users to preserve their umbilical cord stem cells that can be used by the donor, his or her family, and the community for future. So this is going to change the entire concept of medical science with this concept of sharing. Okay. Then lower ownership. As you can see that not long ago, ownership was seen as a status symbol. More assets one owned, more wealthy one seemed. Now all that has changed after the economic depression of 2008. Assets now a liability and ownership even scarier. So today, if you can get what you need through sharing economy, you will live much leaner with fewer valuable possessions and fewer worries. Example, if you live in a city, you need to drive few times per month, so car is not required. If car is not required, you can rent a car, so no car loans, no insurance, no maintenance issues, and no potential thieves to steal your car. Likewise, you can rent or share expensive tools or equipment if you need it only for special projects. And your tool shed garage won't be an attractive target for thieves. Plus, you don't have to spend that much to maintain such expensive tools and equipment. Okay. Okay. So easier access to capital, which means that for any business, earlier, getting access to traditional means of financing was a hassle and an obstacle because most banks thought startups and small businesses risky, though nobody was ready to fund them. So increasing adoption of sharing economy, crowdfunding, again, Tamanna had thrown a lot of light on that. Now easy and convenient way of raising funds by connecting people needing money with those willing to give. So crowdfunding platform like Zeto and Fairsend, less time consuming today, offers better success rate than applying for grants through government or non-profit organizations. So now coming to the sharing economy from the Indian perspective. So these are the impact and benefits of sharing economy in India. So as you can see, uh, I'm not reading the fine print. You will find that there is much better resource utilization because of sharing economy today. There are more jobs created. If I take the example of Zomato delivery boys and Swiggy delivery boys, or for that matter, Ola and Uber having so much of cars on the roads, so more job creation has been created, better social mobility. Why? Because today people are connected via Facebook, via Twitter, via various other ways, and it has actually become a platform for doing business as well. So similarly, focused skill development. Why? Because now today you can get yourself trained and you can obtain skills online and through various apps which are available. Convenience and cost effectiveness. Why? Because you can do these things, the above things, from anywhere and everywhere at any time. And since the sharing economy has come in, it has ushered in a lot of cost effectiveness because of the availability of services. Similarly, transparency of business and accountability because of the reviews that are available, the blogs that are available. So people, consumers can give feedbacks. So the business owners who are into the sharing economy, they tend to maintain their standard. Then impact on environment and infrastructure. Since we are using so much of sharing economy for transportation, for food and other things, so we are definitely reducing the carbon footprint. Okay. And if I'm talking about infrastructure, so infrastructures are also getting shared. In the morning, a school is running a day school, and in the evening, the same infrastructure is being used for a night school. And as rightly said by Tamanna again, the digital literacy, wherein if English is the universal language, then everybody is trying to learn to speak English today. And this is happening. Why? Because internet is providing all that facility today. You have YouTube's videos wherein people can learn English from there. You have many such courses free of cost available online. Okay, coming to the challenges that are there. So there are only basically two focus areas. One is the consumer side and the other is the business side. Consumer side, consumer trust and safety paramount. Security and risk sharing, again, very, very important, because if people are using the uh, various apps, then the security is paramount over there because the bank details and other details are getting shared. So consistency in service quality has to be maintained, and of course the price, because as rightly said by Tamanna again, that Uber and Ola are charging a lot of surge prices. So that is currently not beneficial for the consumer. So business side, regulatory considerations, government has to make it much, much easier and friendly for people to get into these startups. Then sharing resources, more options of sharing have to be created. And of course, the cost. That is, if the cost of setting up the business and doing the business is on a lower side, automatically it works out cheaper for the consumer. Now, I think I'm running short of time. So sharing economic contribution to sustainable development in India, wherein the areas that we can see a lot of sustainability happening is the transport and logistics, human resources, because a lot of human capital now available because of sharing economy. Then Skill India initiative as per the Government of India initiative, the Digital India initiative, that is cheap digital medias being provided to the population, agriculture wherein the land can be shared, the equipments can be shared, the crops can be shared, and the vehicles in which the products have to be delivered to the markets can be shared, and this becomes cheaper for the farmer, in turn becoming cheaper for all of us. Then co-working space, as you may be aware today, that there are lots of offices which are now offering co-working space wherein people from various fraternities can come together, share the space, and keep doing their work. Infrastructure, as I said about the school example, same can be held for the offices, can be held for the industries, and can be held for the colleges as well. Common resources, wherein a single fan can be used for two different places simultaneously. If you create a situation wherein the fan can be shared between two rooms. Similarly, the AC can be shared. The water, the toilets, they can be common, which we have already experienced earlier. Then, of course, the smart villages, which already a lot of things are happening over there, and the smart cities. Now, coming to the way ahead for sharing economy in India, as you can see, the more focus is over here on internet. So internet penetration in India, currently nascent in contrast to developed countries. However, in absolute numbers, number of internet users third in the world today, and we are just behind China and US. India poised to surpass US as second largest internet user base in near future. Currently, internet penetration 19.2%, so which means there's a lot of scope for fast growth of companies in sharing economy as internet penetration keeps on increasing. Sharing economy trend in India gaining traction as more buyers, particularly urban class, finding it easier convenient and cost effective. And as you can see from the market research agency Kantar IMRB report, India's internet users is today 624 million according to January 2021, which is almost 62 crores of population out of the 130 crores that we have, driven by rapid internet penetration and growth in rural areas. Of total user base, 87% Indians defined as regular users who have accessed internet in last 30 days. So out of this, 393 million active internet users in urban India and 230 million in rural India. Report says that 97% users are use mobile phone as one of the devices to access internet, while internet users in urban India has grown by only 7%, reaching 315 million users in 2018. Rural India registered a 35% growth in internet users. So which means the focus is now slowly shifting from urban to the rural sector. Now, Bihar, which is considered to be one of the most backward regions in terms of states in India, registered highest growth in internet users, both urban and rural areas, and growth rate was 35% over last year. Report also noted gender balanced internet usage, wherein women now accessing 42% women using internet. So which is a huge gender balance. And it is fascinating to note that digital revolution now sweeping small towns and villages driven by increased accessibility at affordable data costs. The best example is Jio. And rural India, more than 2/3 of active internet users are now using internet daily to meet their entertainment, communication, and shopping needs. So with this, I end my discussion and I leave it back to Sri Ranjani to please hand it over to the next panelist. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. R.K. Singh, for that wonderful presentation and for all those facts. It really put everything into perspective after Tamanna's introduction. I now pass on the stage to Bhaskar Pant, who can talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the sharing economy and the way forward.
So you are muted.
I requested you to unmute.
Is the presentation visible?
Not yet, no. Now it is.
Yeah. Thank you, Tamanna. Thank you, Sri Ranjani. Thank you, Dr. Singh. Tamanna and Dr. Singh laid out a very good overview of the sharing economy, both in the global context and in the Indian context. I especially like Dr. Singh's views on how it's very important that sharing economy, doesn't only remain in urban India and also, reaches rural India where we have problems related to digital connectivity and internet infrastructure. I will be primarily talking about the impact of sharing economy, impact of COVID-19 on the sharing economy in India, and what is the way ahead for the sharing economy in India in my presentation. Okay. So essentially, the sharing economy is a socio-economic system built around the sharing of resources. People, who are listening to this webinar, who they might be from economics or political economy background, they would understand it more that, sharing economy is a prime example of Adam Smith's invisible hand and a creative destruction which has been caused by the internet-led digital revolution. The success of sharing economy is contingent on the existence of and access to a useful platform. That's why we often use the term platform economy also for the sharing economy. In economic terms, a platform is essentially a market which connects two or more sides of consumers and suppliers through a digital infrastructure. So most of the sharing economic platforms that we were, Dr. Singh was also talking about, and Tamanna was talking about, they work through a digital platform like Ola, be it Uber, Swiggy, Zomato. They exist as a digital marketplace. In India, the sharing economy has been led by startups that have disrupted the ride-sharing sector, the food and package delivery sector, home-based services and repair services segments, etc. Ola, Uber, Swiggy, Zomato, Urban Company, which was earlier called Urban Clap, they are now household names in urban India. You go to any household, anybody would be using either of these platforms. When we say sharing economy, sharing economy is just one of the terms that is used for such economic models. Sometimes we used the term gig economy, which I tend to use a lot of times. So in my presentation, you will see the term gig economy being interchangeably used with sharing economy. You also use the term collaborative consumption, on-demand economy, mesh economy, and Uberization of everything. These are some of the terms that we use for sharing economy. They have some differences, but the main essence remains the same. Now coming to the impact of COVID-19 on sharing economy. So platforms, when the lockdown happened in India, platforms like Zomato, Swiggy, Flipkart, they collaborated with different organizations and companies to provide essential services to remote places. So for example, Uber was running a service where they were providing free rides to healthcare workers. Food delivery platforms like Swiggy and Zomato, they undertook various campaigns to feed the needy. But these platforms also suffered huge losses. So during the first lockdown, travel demand in the mobility sector, when I'm talking about, it fell by 80 to 90%. So mobility sector was one of the worst hit during the first lockdown, because as all of you can remember, delivery platforms like Swiggy and Zomato, they were still delivering at your doorstep even during the lockdown. But mobility sector was really badly hit. Official stats from Ola, they say that they saw a reduction in revenues to almost 95% in April and May 2020. What was the result? There were huge layoffs at Ola, Uber, and even in organizations like Swiggy and Zomato, which was still able to work. Coming to the concept, especially related to sharing economy, Ola and Uber became really popular with the concepts of Uber Pool and Ola Share, where people going on the same route would take the same car, and it was one of the main cost saving feature of Ola, the carpooling feature, where passengers would share a ride. But with COVID-19 and even now things have opened up, but these features, I don't think they will see the light of the day anytime soon. So as I was discussing, in the wake of the pandemic, Ola handed over pink slips to a quarter of its workforce in India. Uber also laid off about 600 of its employees. It shut down its Mumbai office. Swiggy last year announced a layoff of around 1,100 employees, which was nearly 14% of its workforce due to COVID-19. Zomato also dismissed 13% of its workforce. But there were, there was, a silver lining in the cloud. There was a platform called Urban Company, which was able to function and, also acquire new customers during the first lockdown. So Urban Company acquired around 33% new customers during the first lockdown. Most of it was, housework like AC, maybe AC repair or, painting, etc. But it was able to turn the tide against COVID-19. So when we talk about sharing economy platforms or gig economy platforms, one of the main things that we talk about are the platform workers. So the platforms, essentially, they don't treat these workers as employees. They don't even use the term workers. So the term that they mostly use is, partner. So you'll always see when somebody from Swiggy is delivering your food, they'll say the delivery partner or the driver partner when it comes to Ola or Uber. So these people, who are the workers in the platform economy / gig economy, they suffered a lot during the COVID pandemic because they don't have any social security benefits, since they are not treated as employees by these sharing economy platforms. So they were not under any umbrella of benefits. But the gig economy platforms and the sharing economy platforms took a number of measures for the well-being of these partners. So Ola launched a free COVID-19 medical insurance for its driver partners and their spouses to a tune of rupees 30,000, so that drivers who are affected by COVID or who are not able to earn enough, they can be provided some economic relief. It also set up a special COVID-19 fund to help drivers who were affected financially by the pandemic. Similarly, Uber also launched a driver care fund where it deposited rupees 25 crores to address the urgent needs of the driver partners and their families. Zomato started a hand sanitization drive. So whenever you'll order from Zomato, you'll see that, the last temperature of your driver partner was something, or, he has sanitized at this time of the hour. So these were some of the things that Zomato did, apart from, providing an insurance cover for its driver partners who get infected by COVID-19. Uber is currently, undertaking a vaccination drive for all its drivers. So Uber delivery partners who show a valid vaccine digital certificate are eligible for rupees 400 for each of their 2 vaccine shots. It's also testing its drivers regularly and, also providing a one-time payout of up to rupees 6,800 in partial earnings to support for 14 days when they don't work if they get affected by COVID-19. Platforms like Urban Company, they provided interest-free credit to 22,000 service professionals during the first week of the first lockdown. It also offered all of its service partners a free COVID-19 health insurance and an income protection plan, in addition to the existing insurance plans that they provide, and committed a rupees 1.5 crore relief fund. Urban Company is also now getting its service partners fully vaccinated free of cost, and that their target is to get all of them vaccinated with the second dose by 31st August 2021. So whenever you are, so for example, I booked a haircut through Urban Company recently, and I could see, that the service provider has got the first dose of COVID. The COVID vaccination certificate was also available on the platform. So these are some of the things that the platforms are doing. Airbnb, which works in the hospitality sector, it released US dollar 250 million to the hosts around the world who lost a lot of money due to COVID-19 related cancellations at their listed properties on the platform. It also launched Go Near, a new initiative to boost domestic travel and support the economic growth of hosts. But this was all, the rosy picture that is painted by the sharing economic platforms. If you talk to the gig workers, so I have spoken to a lot of gig workers personally, and taken interviews. So the picture that they tell you is completely different. The kind of statements that are made by platforms that, they have set up funds, they are providing security benefits. If you talk to the gig workers, they say all of this exists, but only on paper. So why is it that the gig workers have, or the sharing economy workers have no power? So the gig workers have little bargaining power because of the informal nature of employment that is there in the sharing / platform economy. They are deprived of any benefits, protection, and social security or dispute settlement mechanisms. So you will see that there was an example of a Uber driver who got his hair shaved, and then he was taken out of the Uber system. Although Uber says that, if you take grow a beard or you grow a mustache or you get a haircut, it doesn't matter. But Uber has the power, so it decided no, and the person was thrown out. Uh, According to the ILO, there is no regularity of wages and conducive working conditions. So although a lot of people say that sharing economy provides workers with a lot of flexibility, but there is no regularity when it comes to wages. So when I talk to gig workers, they tell me that sometimes they earn as much as 300 or 500 rupees a day. If you talk about the food delivery platforms, uh, or it can be as low as 100 rupees. It's very, very skewed. So, and many of the platform-based gig workers earn less than minimum wage in their jurisdictions. The gig economy or the sharing economy has been designed in a way that there is no idea of collective bargaining. So if you talk, so the workers are so fragmented. I mean, there are a number, if you go online, you will see that there are a number of worker unions that are there, but they are very fragmented. I have personally interacted with at least 10 different workers unions in the sharing economy, gig economy space for working on workers' rights, but they don't have a unified voice. And the economic crisis has, that has happened to them due to COVID-19. The results have been huge. I have seen pictures of gig workers selling fruits, selling their jewelry, setting up temporary shops inside their cars or, with their bike. So especially during the first lockdown, it was really, really bad. Things have improved now a bit, but it's still not as good as the pre-COVID time. According to a study by Flourish, the economic crisis outweighs the health concerns for gig workers during COVID-19. What they worry more about is the impact on their livelihood, and not only the risk to their health. Another thing, when we talk about the health hazard, so something that is there is when as a passenger, when I am taking an Uber, I get to see what is the temperature, or whether the person has taken a vaccination shot, but the gig worker is not aware about the customer. So it's very, very imbalanced in that way, that you expect the gig worker or the sharing economy worker to be fully vaccinated, to be wearing a mask, and his hands to be sanitized, his temperature is there, but what about you? So that is something that is really, really not right. The mobility sector suffered immensely because of COVID-19. Gig workers have struggled to pay for their EMIs, something that they always tell me, they joined the mobility sector with a lot of hope. Initially, they were provided a lot of incentives when they started driving, or they become a delivery partner, but slowly and slowly these incentives have started reducing, and now the time has come that they are even struggling to pay their EMIs, forget about making any profits. And there is a lack of transparency when it comes, and the kind of promises that are being made by these platforms. Something that we talk about in the platform economy is the monopolization that takes place by platforms, and how platforms become so powerful that nobody is able to question them, and they break the whole market, and then the common man, the people who join the gig economy, the gig workers, they suffer a lot. There is huge discrepancy when it comes to the origin and dispersal of the funds. So something that I think Tamanna was talking about, the trust factor, and also the openness of the platforms to come out with data. So data is something which is really, really missing when it comes to platforms. How they are functioning, how they come up with these new mechanism, even like something like a surge. Something that the Indian Federation of App-Based Transport Workers, which is a workers' body, it has highlighted is how a lot of driver partners are getting infected, and they are not even getting a 2 weeks paid sick leave and a quarantine. So this is something that is worth looking at. You know, the occupational hazards and the safety standards that are there in that are operational in the sharing economy platforms. A welcome change for the sharing economy was the Code on Social Security 2020, and you know, the union budget, where we, for the first time, the word gig economy was mentioned, and the parliament did recognize the gig economy by defining gig worker and platform worker under law. So under the new Code on Social Security, the central government will be finally able to undertake social security measures for gig workers and platform workers. You know, they'll be getting there are mechanisms for pension, for social security, for health, but the sad news is that the implementation of the code has been deferred now, because what the central government says is the state governments have to come up with their specific guidelines, but we still don't have a clear date in sight when this code will be operational. Like, although there are a lot of ambiguities and a lot of problems within the code, but it was still being seen as the, you know, first step for platform workers' well-being in India. But as of now, we don't know when it will, you know, come and get operational. Next, you know, I want to talk about the future of sharing economy in India. So there has been a huge improvement in certain sectors in the sharing economy. For example, food delivery has seen huge improvements, especially due to the fact that although now there is no lockdown, in metro cities, people still prefer to order food in the comfort of their home. They have become used to it rather than you know, going out to dine. So although that too has started, but the percentage of food delivery has gone up. Secondly, you know, lot of us, you know, we hear about these concepts like work from home, or there is this another concept called work from mountains, which is now coming up. So when it comes to the future of work, a lot of companies are feeling that they will be able to, in fact, get more out of people if either there is a model of working where they don't come to office at all, or there is some kind of a hybrid model where probably you can come 1 day in a week, or, you know, 2 days in a month, or 3 days in a month, kind of a thing. So a large share of the population are now embracing the concept of live and work anywhere, which has especially increased during the pandemic. So that might lead to an increase in demand in rental of short-term accommodations. So say an organization, a platform like Airbnb would be able to benefit from that, when people will have the flexibility of to work from anywhere. So for example, I have a friend who works with a tech firm, but she doesn't have to go to office. So she now lives in Goa in an Airbnb, and yeah, she's there indefinitely. So that will be something that we might be able to see in the near future. Again, why platform economy or the sharing economy works is because the barriers to entry are very low. Usually it's very easy to join, you know, become a gig worker, or, you know, join the sharing economy. And according to one estimate by the Boston Consulting Group, the gig/sharing economy has the potential to service up to 90 million jobs in India's non-farm economy alone, and transact over $250 billion in the volume of work. So although it's an incremental 1.2% to India's GDP, it's huge. And especially, you know, when we are looking at job losses in the formal economy, a lot of people are, you know, losing their jobs. So sharing economy, to an extent, might be able to fill that gap.
I'm just going to request you to wrap it up now so we can move to the question.
Just one more slide.
Thank you.
So platforms are now slowly getting back to pre-COVID level. but the growth of sharing economy will be very sector specific. One of the things that we need to do in the sharing economy is to rebuild trust. And it is vital that we act on the lessons of the pandemic to ensure that the gig workers and the sharing economy workers are afforded protections that are there in the formal economy, or we might lose the benefits of the new digital world. In the end, just to conclude, sharing economy will act as a potential pathway to socio-economic development and employment creation across India. It has that kind of a feature, and but what is required is concerted efforts across industry bodies. We need the right kind of regulatory and policy push from the government so that the sharing economy can be propelled further and act as a catalyst for India's economic recovery in the aftermath of COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bhaskar. I now open it up to Tamanna and Shruti to ask questions, and also for the audience to share their questions. And if Bhaskar and Dr. Singh have questions for each other and want to initiate a discussion, you're welcome to do that too.
Dr. Singh is on mute.
Okay. Well, in fact, I just wanted to highlight one point over here. Tata Steel. All of you must have heard about this name. And I am pretty close to this company because I belong to Jamshedpur. I have been born and brought up over there, though I'm settled in Pune now. Most of my in-laws and everybody, they are still working for Tata Steel. So Tata Steel has brought in a concept. In fact, you must have heard about TCS as well, that for the next 5 years, people are not going to come to offices. So pretty soon, maybe in the near future, when I visit Jamshedpur, where Tata Steel entire office was there, maybe probably being rented out or sold out to a mall or something. So this is the concept that today sharing economy is bringing in.
So I think we could start with some questions that I had for both Mr. Singh and Mr. Pant. I'll start with Mr. Singh. So very interesting presentation for someone like me also who is still new to the concept of sharing economy, and I'm sure a lot of members in the audience are here to actually understand what a sharing economy is. This was great. Thank you, Tamanna, to you also to introduce us to the concept. Very, very helpful, very, very detailed. So I have some questions, and I think Mr. Pant also brought it up. So when we talk about a sharing economy, let's take the example of Uber. So how do we ensure that standards are maintained? For example, I am a consumer and I come and I use Uber, and then I'm rude to the Uber driver and I make damages to his car or her car, and they have to pay for the damages, right? I don't think there is a system of, say, Uber taking responsibility for the damages. At the same time, for example, many a times that I am traveling now in Uber, I am wearing a mask, but the Uber driver is talking on the phone, so his mask is off. So how do we sort of ensure a standardized, consistent service? And so that's one question. The other question is, I'm still a little ambiguous about the rural side of sharing economy. For example, if there are examples of, and I know that the fact that sharing has been something that India has traditionally done, and so we say, but at the same time, that has also led to segregation. It's been between a particular caste community, right? So how do we ensure that the aspect of caste, for example, does not come into sharing? Because sharing is interacting and touching, and the concept, the idea of untouchability, and is still so active in rural India. So how do we sort of, and also in parts of urban India, how do we sort of get over those hurdles? Then the other question that I have is to do with rural women. We were talking in the middle about how there is a certain gender balance being achieved, but at the same time, the National Family Health Survey has shown us that we're still, like, rural women are still the least digitally literate or have access to digital to internet or to smartphones, and that's about a 24% gap between men and women. So how do we sort of ensure that women can be a part of this? While the barriers are low, are they low enough for access to these, for these women? So that's another question I have. So that's for you, Mr. Singh, and of course, Mr. Pant, if you want to chip in. Mr. Pant, for you specifically, I have some questions which are to do with COVID-19. Now, we sort of discussed that hospitality, food and beverages, and transport are areas where you can really invest in terms of sharing economy. But now that we see healthcare has become one of the major issues, is there a way in which sharing economy, ideas of it can be used in healthcare? And if so, can there be we saw the kind of community engagement around COVID, especially like really people coming out and helping each other. So is there a way that a sharing economy model can be used in COVID relief? And if so, has there already been something like that? So if you could shed some light on that. And also because you are in the policy and advocacy field, I sort of wanted to understand, you spoke about social security briefly and how the central government has at least acknowledged it. But at the same time, are there any tangible ways in which local governments, for example, or urban local bodies can already take up the responsibility of ensuring that there is parity and especially protection for gig workers? So these are some questions that I have. We could start with you, Mr. Singh.
Yeah, sure. So I'll take your questions part by part. Your first question was with regard to the Uber thing. So with regard to the Uber thing, you would have noticed, possibly you would have experienced this, but overall, if I am talking about, then there is a screen that is there between the driver and the customer, the person who's traveling. So no matter, first of all, the person has to wear the mask, of course. However, if the person is not wearing the mask, there is still a protection of a screen that is there. That's a plastic screen that is there between the person sitting behind and the driver. That's one. Second thing that I'll address is there should be regulations that have to be brought in by the government and the bodies to control this menace both ways. It can be from the driver side also, and it can be from the consumer side also. Third, the Uber company has to, because since the regulations are not that strong in India, I would like to cite a different example over here. If you would have, I'm sure all of you would have eaten Lay's wafers, Lay's chips, which is a very strong PepsiCo brand of US, right? Which is there in India. You'll be surprised to know, because the regulations are not strong in India, they are using palmolive oil in the wafers that is being made. And palmolive oil is banned across the world. So all the farsans and chips and wafers that we eat in India is made of palmolive oil because the regulations are not strong. Palmolive is supposed to cause the maximum number of heart attacks. Okay, so I'm just bringing in a reference from there that Uber company provides us the internet facility in the car. Am I right? So can they not install a camera as well, wherein whatever the driver is doing is visible to them at the back end? Definitely, this will bring in a lot of control on the customer as well as the driver, right? I think I have been able to answer your first part of the question. Now coming to the second part of the question, with regard to the rules act, you will be surprised to know and the penetration of internet has drastically gone up, and each and every person, right from the kid to the old person, is using a smartphone. Though it may be a second hand set bought from a local store. However, they are the amount of internet usage that is happening in the rural sector is much, much higher than what is happening in the urban sector. Okay, so that's one. So harnessing this internet now, ride sharing services are there. I'm not talking about Ola, I'm not talking about Uber, I'm talking about the bicycle, I'm talking about the scooterette. Okay, these services can be extended to the rural sector because the bicycles, I think, Sriranjani, correct me if I'm wrong, it is available in Bangalore city as well. It is available in Pune as well. I'm sure, Pansar, it must be there in the Delhi side as well, the bicycle sharing concept. And they are charging just 1 rupee or 2 rupees for sharing the bicycle for an hour or so. And the bicycle can be dropped anywhere, and then the next person can use it. Am I right? So if the internet has become cheap, and if I'm talking about cheap, Jio is providing it for 150 rupees for 28 days for 1.5 GB. Am I right? So if the rural sector person can afford 150 rupees, can definitely uh, afford the bicycle and the scooterette concept. So if this comes in over there, the usage of sharing economy will definitely go up. Now, if the usage of sharing economy is going up, so the concept of untouchability will definitely shrink, because people are not aware कि बॉस ये कौन से कास्ट का है या मैं कौन से कास्ट का हूं. Are you getting it? So you have to bring in a concept of community coming together. It Internet revolution has brought in that community together today. Everybody is on WhatsApp, everybody is on Facebook, everybody is on Instagram, now Telegram, which is also there, Signal, which is again there, right? So these concepts have brought in people together. They have brought in communities together because there are groups as well, right? They are inciting also because it can result in riots and all these stuffs as well. That is the flip side of it. However, I'm talking on the positive front. So if these types of concepts are reached out over there at affordable cost to these people, people will come together and communities will come together. That is one. Similarly, that can be extended to the agricultural sector, wherein sharing of services, a company like Uber has all these JCB machines and tractors and everything under one roof, which is being shared to the farmers for doing their agriculture, right? So that will again bring in a lot of traction in the rural sector and people coming together. So if a higher caste landowner is having his land barren and idle, he won't mind using it and sharing it with people who are from low caste also. Why? Because he is seeing the money coming in for that. Am I right? Now, coming to the third part of your question, which was the women sector, right? So the rural women, we have to bring in a digital literacy over there. We have to have chopals. We have to have a culture of adult education. Now we have to harness the benefit of internet. That is basically what I'm trying to tell you over here. Now internet is being accessed by the rural sector, so which means that even the women are accessing. As you must have seen in my presentation, the gap between the men and women using internet is 42% women and around 6 uh, 68%, I'm sorry, 58% men. So which means that's a huge gender equilibrium which has come in. So if women are using internet, why not give them such facilities wherein they are digitally trained, they are made digitally literate, they are provided with a basic sense of education via the internet through Chaupas through evening classes, through mid classes, or whatever. I mean, these are just options which I'm sharing. And this will definitely usher in the untouchability thing and abolish it slowly and steadily. The fourth thing which you have not spoken, however, I would like to add over here is government, which is a strong government right now because it's in majority, can bring in such regulations wherein casteism can be abolished. Would I, am I, have I answered your questions well?
Yes, yes, Dr. Singh, it was
Over
great
to
to hear
you.
you. Yeah.
Over to you, Pansar.
Hi, Shruti. So your first question was related to, especially in times of COVID and in healthcare, uh, how sharing economy can play a part. So I think one of the main drivers of sharing economy will be healthcare in the future, especially when we talk about sharing of health data, which is still not, if I talk in the Indian context, it's still not a practice which is there. So once we have shared databases of patients and their health histories, their records, I think that will play a huge role, especially when next, I hope there is no pandemic like this in the future, but even in treatment of the existing diseases that are there. Another aspect, if you'll ask me, where where a platform can play a role is, something like telemedicine, which was there, which was very popular earlier, but in recent times we saw it was not, it lost its popularity. Now it's suddenly gaining popularity again. And you reminded me of that because a friend of mine is actually launching a telemedicine center tomorrow. So I think for people who cannot access health services now, what something what Mr. Singh was also saying, the internet penetration is increasing. In urban India, across rural India, when internet, when you'll have internet will be in the hands of a more number of users. I think then telemedicine as part of the larger sharing economy can play a very big part uh, in the context of sharing economy in healthcare. Your second question with regard to how local governments and municipal bodies can play a part in sharing economy. Uh, so to be very honest, in the Indian context, I haven't really heard of many cases. But if I talk about Europe, so specific cities have specific legislations for sharing economy platforms. Like for example, in Germany, there are some cities where Uber is not allowed to work, while there are some cities where only a certain kind of Uber service is allowed to work. Similarly, in say short-term accommodation, like say an Airbnb, if you go to certain cities in Europe, there are specific legislations. So, for example, when I went, I'm telling you from my personal experience, when I went to Rome, I had to fill in a special form and pay a certain tax to the local, their municipality or local, local government department. Now we are also seeing, not at maybe at the city level, but states are slowly coming up with specific guidelines. So there was some talk of, Goa. I'm not sure if they are out yet, but the Goa Legislative Assembly was deliberating specific guidelines for, hotel aggregators and accommodation aggregators, which includes Airbnb. Similarly, Delhi is also planning to come up with some specific guidelines for drivers. So you have these kind of things emerging. But for me, like if you ask me personally, the regulation of sharing economy is still at a very nascent stage in India. So it's something which is, and also because the sharing economy is itself evolving. So you don't really know. So if you ask me personally, I don't see Uber or Ola as anymore as the traditional sharing economy models. They have become, you know, like any other company. Now Ola is also making electric scooters. You know, Uber is going into it sold Uber Eats to Zomato recently, but they are also diversifying. So we don't really know whether the models that we are talking about right now, how much sharing would there be in the times to come. So since these models are themselves evolving, it's very hard even for regulators to catch up with them, because these models are evolving and, you know, the regulations are still at a very, very nascent stage. So Code of Social Security was a very welcome step, because especially it's, you know, I have spoken to platforms and also to platform workers. So it is something which has not happened even in a Western country, something like this. So it was a very welcome step. But as I told you, the implementation has been deferred. So we'll have to see in the times to come how it will be implemented. I hope I was able to answer your question.
You were. Thank you so much. It was again very, very informative. Sri Ranjani, do we have time for questions, or do we not? Would you have time?
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah, we can definitely share another 10 minutes.
Okay, Sri Ranjani, why don't
just 10 minutes? It's my mom's birthday today, actually. So I have to rush.
Happy birthday to her. But Sri Ranjani, you can start. Let's wrap up fast. Let's start with the questions. And
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had one question on, you can choose which one to answer. We had one question on how to improve the trust factor of gig workers and gig economy. And then we had a really intricate question about what is your opinion on the role of gender in a shared economy? Ideally, gender would take a more significant role here because all economic transactions as such would have a more intimate or personal nature. Trust would also play a vital role and might lead to form a gender segregation here. Despite the inclusive nature of the sharing economy, can also be extended to racial discrimination. So how do we tackle this? So I think we can go to like how trust can be improved and comfort in the sharing economy. What do you think?
Yeah, Pansar.
Who has to answer that?
I mean, either you can take it or I can take it. Not a problem.
Dr. Singh can take it if he wants.
Okay,
he's more knowledgeable than me.
And nothing of that. We are all learners. Okay. So if you're talking about the trust factor, first of all, the reviews, blogs have to be made more stronger. The quality of app has to be made more stronger. The internet that is being provided, penetration has to be increased further with quality penetration. I mean, like somebody from Latur is joining my webinar and there is a connection issue and he drops off. So that the India has to make the robust infrastructure. The government has to work on it. The companies, the stakeholders have to work on it and make it more stronger. So definitely the trust factor will go up. Then as Uber and Ola ka example was taken earlier, again, the trust factor very, very important over there. So the company, the stakeholder and the government have to bring in such regulations, which is for the driver, for the company and for the customer, where again, the trust factor will definitely go up, right? So these are the areas through which the trust factor can go up. Okay. Now, if somebody is doing an online payment for the services in sharing economy being used, then the secure payment mode has to be there so that the details of the person is kept confidential and is not shared with anybody. If you would be aware, Facebook and WhatsApp do business by sharing our data to the entire world. I am sure you would be aware of this. Therefore, the encryption concept came in. The security concept came in. So till the time the security was not there, they were making loads of money on our expense. When the security concept came in, still they are doing it, because see, every rule has some or the other way of breaking it. So they must be there. But definitely the concept of encryption and security has taken up the trust factor on the WhatsApp and Facebook. So this is the trust factor that I'm talking about. Yes, over to you, Mr. Pan.
So I'll take the second question on the gendered impact and on the sharing economy. So to be very honest, this is something that, you know, I have spoken to a lot of researchers, a lot of people who work in this area, and this is something that we all have grappled with. So there is, honestly, there is not a lot of literature which talks on the gendered impact of uh, the sharing economy. But if I talk to you about the numbers, so there are certain sectors, for example, in the service industry, in as part of the sharing economy, you will see a lot more of women gig workers than, say, compared to the mobility sector or the food delivery space. So one of the good things that, you know, that we see now is because the kind of flexibility that sharing economy offers. So there are a lot of platforms which are now coming up in different spaces. Say like there are sharing economy platforms coming in the fitness space. So there you will see a lot more, you know, female participation compared to, say, sectors like even like, although there I won't say that the participation in mobility sector is zero. I mean, I have been driven by a female Uber driver once, but still compared to the number of men that are there, probably because there are other reasons. It can be reason due to safety and you know, occupational hazards, because so that can be one of the reasons that why we see a lower participation of women in the mobility gig workforce. But if you look at, say, a platform like Urban Company, where you can get like a therapist or, you know, someone for a facial, you know, you will see a lot of women gig workers registered there. So I think the participation of women in the gig economy will be very sector specific. You know, sectors which women will feel that they are comfortable working in, you will see a large number of participation from them in the times to come.
I would like to add over here is, through this platform, I am doing my bit at my end in Pune to my students. I would request to do it on the Chintan front and to the government, that we have to first of all understand that we are unequals and men are always less than women. We have to first understand this very, very strongly. And this is to the participants as well, and to both the wonderful ladies sitting over here, that women are much, much stronger than us. However, the occupational hazard may not at times allow them to work the way we do. So we have to bring in this social awareness among people that gender inequality will always be there, with the woman being the stronger one, because she is the one who's bearing us for 9 months. Can we do that? We cannot. So they are much, much stronger. The concept of women being weak is wrong, which has been traditionally being brought in. So let sharing economy today take this message across, that women are much, much stronger than men. And please do not call it equal. They are much, much. I'll put it across that way.
I completely agree with Dr. Singh on that front.
Thank you, sir. On that note, we at Chintan always put gender and the marginalized in front when we work, and we try to assess how they can be included and their particular and specific challenges, so that that could be removed. So thank you for that. With that, I would like to thank our speakers, Dr. Singh and Mr. Pant. It was great to have you here. And we hope that we engage with you again. And thank you to Sri Ranjani for pulling this off. Many congratulations. And Sri Ranjani, over to you. You want to, yeah.
And Pant sir, a very happy birthday to your mother.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh and Pant sir. I'm just going to plug in the next webinar, which is happening on August 26th, Thursday. And today we understood the basics of sharing economy and how sharing economy was impacted by COVID. And in the next session, we're going to have stakeholders from Ola, Rento Mojo, and people who run sharing economy businesses to come and give us their insights and what they think is going to be the future of scaling up the sharing economy. Thank you all so much for joining today. You will receive this recorded webinar in an email, and it will also be put up on YouTube. Do follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn to keep up with all our events. And thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Pant sir.
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Thank you, Sri Ranjani.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.